you know how I always harp on about graphics, right? That's for me, that's like a big plus. I've also said not necessarily. Like games such as Valheim has been really good too. But here's the thing. There's a difference between graphics and art style. So I want to get into that because it's educational and you will thank me later on. Let's go.
There's always been an obsession with video game graphics ever since their inception. And as years have passed, graphical technology has improved as hardware has improved, naturally. And seeing the leaps in graphics since the early 2000s has been nothing but amazing to witness during my time as a gamer. But over the last decade, graphical improvements began to mean much less. Comparing games from 2023 to 2013, I often find that not just a few, but a lot of those games.
I've not played Assassin's Creed, and I'm just gonna quickly say I've not even seen any gameplay. So looking at this now, it looks good. It looks really good. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's always a plus if the graphics are great. Well, not always. I've also said it depends on the environment. It depends on the gameplay. It depends on combat. It depends on story. Like, it really does depend. So, for example, a lot of people love Minecraft. That's like the biggest, most successful game, isn't it? I've never played it before. I'm personally not interested. But Valheim, although it's not graphically pleasing, but it's an art style. I'm a bit stressed out about this now because I'm thinking of all the things I used to say, like Zelda, for example, and I did not realize, I was saying like the graphics in Zelda was okay, but now I obviously look back and go, well, it's on purpose. But then again, it's Nintendo. Sorry if you love Nintendo, I don't mind Nintendo.
Games from before 2013 still look better than the ones releasing in current year. Now certainly there are some noticeable improvements if you really focus on the textures and analyze the pixels when comparing a modern game to one a decade old, but playing a game like Dishonored from 2012 or BioShock Infinite from 2013, or even The Order 1886 from 2014, if you didn't know any better, you'd think these games were new releases. They just don't look as dated as you might think for being 10 years old. Yet despite the technology getting better since then, very few games can top these games, or even match them visually. So why is this? Well, like all things, a tool is only as good as the one who wields it. And when in the right hands, modern game development tools can produce amazingly impressive results. But unfortunately, so many studios have been putting out games that, while graphically are impressive due to their technology that they're built with, end up looking like utter dog shit.
This one just came out, that one. Oh my god, yeah, Forspoken!
A game like Forspoken has great graphics, but looks extremely generic.
Terrible
and almost
game.
blinding in its visuals, in a very washed out and ugly sort of way. Immortals of Avium, a game released just a few days ago running on Unreal Engine 5.
Oh yeah, is anyone playing this game? Anyone playing this game at all?
Even though I know it isn't. The devs probably did work very hard on creating those assets, but it just doesn't...
I'm sorry, I'm listening to him, but like, the reason why I didn't play this one was because I found it really bright and shiny in my face, and I can't do games like that. I find games that are very just like bang, give me migraines personally, and it's just too much commotion that you feel like you're not really in the game. It's just action, action, action. And that was the same feeling that I had in Forspoken. I don't know if you guys have played this game, Avium. What do they call it? Avium. Let me know, please, because I do want to know your thoughts on it.
Come across that way. And it doesn't help that this game in particular is so visually bloated. Like, I love fast-paced games, but I can't tell what the fuck is happening on screen here. The visibility is just awful due to the graphical and artistic style they went for. While I understand that realistic graphics sell to the casual audience, I'm always looking towards companies that have a more distinctive art style instead, even if it is more low poly. Some wrongfully ascribe this generic look of video games to the Unreal Engine itself, but just because a game is made in Unreal doesn't mean they have to look like this. I think Sea of Thieves is a great example of a game that takes advantage of the strengths that the Unreal Engine provides, and is a beautiful game in many regards, but it still has a distinctive art style that separates it from a game like, say, Atomic Heart.
There's so many games that I've never played. I heard Sea of Thieves was really good, and I never had the chance to play it. If you're really bad.
It's not the engine, it's how it's being used.
I don't even know that one.
A game made in the Unity engine, is another example of a game that's a visual treat, yet is not what I would consider AAA graphics. And to get to the main point here, I'm a strong believer that graphics don't really matter. To some degree,
why is it doing this? I do wish that they put the name of the game up in the top corner though for me, because that would help.
Reached a point in the last 10 years, and especially in current year,
it does say it, Metro Exodus.
Mostly plateaued. So art style
What is going on?
The games from 10 to 15 years ago still hold up really well today.
Please.
Is a testament to how true that statement is.
This is great.
Games like Rage from 2011 or Stalker from 2006 still hold up incredibly well. And games like Fable or Dragon Age and Kingdoms of Amalur employ a timeless art style and visual style, so they can be...
Yo, I've been playing WoW Classic off stream, and the graphics, it's not the best, but guess what? The art style is really awesome, and that's probably what draws us in. I'm learning a lot about the art style.
be enjoyed for years to come.
Yeah,
2
it's
years
great.
ago with the release of Elden Ring, there was some very strange rage bait online about Elden Ring having bad graphics.
The graphics are dog shit.
Are you sure about that?
The graphics are dog shit.
Really?
The graphics are dog shit. The graphics are dog shit.
But I'd take 100 different games with an art style half as good as what FromSoft
What the
delivered
hell?
before another Atomic Heart or Immortals of Avium or Forspoken. And I do want to reiterate something I've mentioned in my past videos, and that's that these two things aren't mutually exclusive. You don't have to pick just one. A game can have both amazing graphics and an amazing art style, and even high visibility. I think games like BioShock and Dishonored perfectly encapsulate that.
Another one I have not played. But wait a second, can we rewind? Elden Ring's got bad graphics? I mean, I think I'd like to learn more about that, because I don't exactly know what they're comparing. Like, what exactly do they mean? I think the main thing that I really liked about Elden Ring was the fact, I mean, let's be honest, Elden Ring can be a miserable game. If you're new to Elden Ring and you're playing it for the very first time, right, it can be really, really difficult because you're always dying. But at the same time, I think the environment and the world, it was just very picturesque. So I don't really know what they mean by it being bad graphically. Like, that's strange.
But even games like Doom 2016
And
and
those are my
Eternal are
weakness.
great looking games. And a trick I recently learned about Doom Eternal is that the lighting on the enemies are separate from the environment, so they are always lit and clearly visible, even
Okay.
in darker areas. This in turn makes the game look less cinematic or realistic, but is much better for the gameplay Doom serves,
Okay.
and even the art style. The game director Hugo Martin said that during development for Eternal, they had at first
What
made
game
the
is this?
lighting come from the environment, much like they did with Doom 2016. But in
BioShock.
playtesting, it felt really bad because oftentimes you couldn't clearly see what it was that got you killed. And with Eternal being a much more punishing game and more fast-paced than 2016, visibility took precedent over realism.
Jeez,
And
this
I
was
think
like
what's
a
really
nasty
important
game.
to take away from that is visibility really matters in games. It isn't just Immortals that has this problem, it's a problem I and many others have with many different modern games. Now, I primarily play PC on a 27-inch monitor like 4 feet from my face, yet oftentimes there are so many cases where it's almost impossible to see an enemy that's right in front. Why does
Okay.
it feel like everyone just blends into everything? Looking at a mountain range in real life versus a picture of that mountain range, your eyes can pick out much more things in person, whereas in a picture you're going to lose a lot of detail because
Well, obviously, like in a picture, you can't see everything. You can't see how it bends and curves and shit.
you just have captured a 3D environment but on a 2D plane. And when you play video games, it's on a screen, which is essentially a picture. You aren't going to be able to see the same things on this mountainside in Battlefield 2042 compared to if you saw this mountain in
Yeah, I get that. I get what he's saying.
person.
This video feels 10 years old because now that you put a mountain in a game, you can literally put in a forest rather than billboard the trees. Also, I wanted to say Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead 2, how old is Red Dead 2? 2018. Really? Witcher 3 game release. That came out in 2015. Oh my god, like that's really not that long ago, but it feels like a very long time ago. Was it 2015? It was not. It's not that long ago, but I guess it still is considered an older game now, right? How is 2018 5 years ago already? That's what I was thinking. I'm kind of panicking now. I'm like, oh. Witcher was above its time in design? Oh yeah. It was beautiful. Red Dead 2 is a beautiful game, for sure. What are some good examples of games that have not very good graphics, but really cool art style? I guess Zelda would be one. Spyro would be one. I like Spyro. I don't understand why they had to change Mario from like 2D to 3D. He looks ridiculous 3D, but I'm just gonna throw that out there. Same with Sonic the Hedgehog. Don't need to do that. He's great in retro style. Leave him alone. So much time has passed by. Where did my life go? Are you contemplating life? I still play A Link to the Past from time to time, and then that came out in 1991. Oh, wow. I think I would like to play Red Alert 2. And I don't even remember when that came out. Red Alert 2, Command and Conquer, was such a good game. Tears, Okami Classic. Mafia 3, Firewatch. Mario 64 was amazing. Jet Set Radio, huh? Adventure had the best graphics of all. Borderlands. It is good. And I don't know that one. Did you see earlier on where there was that girl who the guy lit a cigarette up for her? I don't know where it is. There. This one here. I don't know what game that is, but that was pretty cool. Red Alert 2, let's go. How much do you rate Starfield? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't like to rate games 1 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I can't do that. I think it's silly rating games out of 10, to be honest with you. Because everybody has their own opinions on what is good and what is bad and what preferences they like in a game. Like someone might really like FPS, for example, and then they play a horror game like, what's a good horror game? Well, I mean, that doesn't have FPS. I don't know, whatever, insert word here, and it's nothing like their FPS. They're probably going to give it like a 1 out of 10. Do you know what I mean? Like say for example, I mean, I want to say Resident Evil, but Resident Evil has guns. So anyways, they might not like it though because it's horror or for whatever reason. So that's why I think rating games out of 10 is a bit silly. I think that's like old school now. Like we shouldn't be doing that anymore. We should talk about pros and cons of a game instead, because then you get a better understanding of what my preferences are, but then B, whether you can agree with me or not. Do you know what I mean? It makes sense. But I would say, like, I like Starfield. I think it's definitely got its pros and it's definitely got its cons. From a graphics side, it's not bad, but it's not very good either. Like, it's really not that bad. I think it could be better. I think the characters, the world looks fine, but the characters look a bit off to me. Let me ask you, are you enjoying? I'm definitely enjoying Starfield. What about you?
12 era of FPS games. In the
I'm going to rewind a little bit.
Games, it's on a screen, which is essentially a picture. You aren't going to be able to see the same things on this mountainside in Battlefield 2042 compared to if you saw this mountain in person.
Okay.
I think back to the 2008 to 2012 era of FPS games, and the textures were a bit lower resolution, but the character models were often highly detailed, and it really made them stand out by having sharper objects on somewhat of a more blurry backdrop.
I don't mind
this.
this.
Made it almost more akin to real life because your eyes can pick out an enemy a bit easier in those older games.
Yeah.
Especially at a distance. And funnily enough, you'll often see competitive FPS players cranking their graphics down in games in order to have a bit more of a competitive edge.
Okay, I did not know that.
I don't think every game should look like BattleBit. It's been a lot of fun playing that game and having long-ranged engagements in my gameplay. You can actually see enemies from afar, or see someone when they peek out from the side of a building. And it feels great to have some of that long-range gunplay in a Battlefield-style game again, like I did back in Bad Company.
I'm not gonna lie, like that did not look bad. I mean, yes, it's very pixely, that's why it's called BattleBit, but it looked really fun, and it reminded me of, I mean, I want to say Minecraft, but it also reminded me of the world in Valheim where it's beautiful. You know, you can see the grass swaying, the wheat swaying, you see the trees, you see the wind, you can feel it, like you can hear it in your ears when you're in a cave, you hear the sound. It's very immersive, and again, visually.
I think one of the best examples of art style being more important than graphics, though, is with the PS5 Demon's Souls remake. I think in every way except for graphics, the remake is worse than the original. The atmosphere is much diminished, the art direction became more generic looking, and both the enemy designs and environments have been changed to go against the visual storytelling that the original did so successfully. And in turn, while Elden Ring doesn't have the graphical fidelity of the Demon's Souls remake, I think it's a far better looking game because of its incredibly
For me, it was more crisp than this. I don't know what this is.
Art direction. Another example I've mentioned in the past is about the Destiny franchise, where there are many instances where Destiny 1 looks better than Destiny 2. The art direction and lighting of the sequel leaves the game feeling a bit more plastic than its predecessor.
Okay.
While there is definitely some incredible visuals inside of Destiny 2 areas, it's when comparing places inside both games that you can really start to notice just how big of a drop-off there is in the sequel. Several shots on the Cosmodrome or the moon are noticeably uglier, and even in the reprised raids like King's Fall, Great use of shadows and contrasting colors from the original are now washed out and missing detail in the sequel.
Okay.
Some of my favorite games visually are ones that use an almost cartoon aesthetic, like Overwatch, which has a very Pixar-esque look, or games like Kingdoms of Amalur, or the Fable games, or a game...
Oh, I'm really sorry. I honestly can't handle, I really cannot handle cartoony ones. See, everyone has their own, their own, what's the word, preference on what style they like, and for me, I do not like bright cartoony stuff. I enjoyed playing Cult of the Lamb. It was bright and colorful. Stardew Valley was as well, but after some time it makes me sick. And I'm not talking motion sickness or anything like that. I'm talking just like migraines. I just get migraines. It just affects my eyes in a way that I just no. And it's not, I don't know, it's not visually pleasing for me. What about you? Do you guys like cartoony? Does anyone play Fortnite? I've been meaning to ask you guys this. It's very cartoony and it's very successful.
Like Alice Madness
I could try
Returns.
it one day.
These games all hold up incredibly well today.
Oh, this looks cool.
Their visual designs have stood the test of time and can be played today without feeling
This
too
is not
dated
bad.
due to the strength of the art direction
I don't mind
and
this.
atmospheric design. Now, some games have bad art style and bad graphics. I think Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are a pretty good example of that. Both
Yeah.
graphically and artistically, they look like absolute shit. And that's not the Switch's fault. Sword and Shield on the Switch looks much better than Scarlet and Violet, and for some reason, the more 3D and open world the games have gotten, the worse the visuals and art direction. It's both unfortunate and confusing because a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a game also on the Switch, looks pretty good given the hardware, and I was hoping Pokemon's visuals would at least be somewhere in that ballpark by now, especially since it's clearly possible.
Okay.
Every time I hear a studio try to sell their game and their focus is on how cinematic
This
or
is cool.
photorealistic it is, I usually just check out. The industry spends so much time trying to make games realistic without remembering that games should focus more on the gameplay and its art direction.
Wait a second. I know her face. She is from Death Stranding. Is this a spoiler? Yeah. Isn't that chick from isn't that Fragile from Death Stranding? It totally is, isn't it? Death Stranding.
It's like they say, every time a game developer brags about how cinematic
Girl in the
their
Mirror,
game
no
is,
way.
an angel loses
That
its
is
wings.
Death Stranding.
I care much less about a world that looks ultra-realistic and more about a world that feels realistic, with a clear, cohesive art direction and world building through its environmental storytelling.
This is Hellblade, the one that has not come out yet. Hellblade 2.
And I think sometimes people confuse themselves into thinking a game that looks realistic is more immersive, but I think that has very little to do with making a game immersive. It's more about believability. Do the visuals, sound design, music, and tone of the game mesh well? If so, then that's all that's needed to immerse someone. Going back to Atomic Heart for a second, I think a big reason why it failed to immerse me is despite its impressive visuals graphically, the game's tone and art direction feels very generic, and it pales in comparison to BioShock at every turn. And I make the comparison to BioShock because obviously it was a very clear inspiration and is often compared to BioShock, but in Atomic Heart, the Unreal Engine technology is all that's selling that game, because the story, the gameplay, and the atmosphere feels pretty uninspired, which is unfortunate. It's a game that otherwise could have been really interesting, if helmed and directed by the right talent. Sometimes I look at games from 2014 and 2015 and think that visuals peaked back then. There's of course exceptions to that in recent years, but I think it's a bit wild that Assassin's Creed Unity from 2014 somehow still has more striking visuals and lighting than the newer games. The Order 1886, despite being a fairly average game, looks absolutely amazing, much better than a lot of Unreal Engine titles in recent years. Dying Light 1 looks more impressive than its sequel. Even Far Cry 4 has more attention to detail than Far Cry 5, with 4 having much more lively environments versus the more static ones of 5. Battlefield 1's destruction.
And why is that? Like why is that? Maybe back then it took more people to make the environments, whereas now they just throw it into a software, right? And then push a button and then bam, you've got your own world.
Constructability and details beat out 2042, and it's not even close. Infamous Second Son, Arkham Knight. These games still outshine games 8 to 9 years later visually.
Whoa.
The graphical technology and more high-res textures are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for modern AAA developers because somehow we keep seeing regressions in so many different areas over the years. It's not just the visuals. but the animations too. But I'll save that for another day.
Okay.
Environmental storytelling is the most effective way to tell a story and immerse us in a world. Humans are visual creatures, and exposition dumping is often a big turnoff. This doesn't mean that dialogue or even some exposition is a bad thing, far from it, but it's important to make sure that the visuals speak for themselves, and the dialogue and exposition service the visuals, rather than the other way around. I think a game like Firewatch does this almost perfectly, and I plan to cover that in a future video, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your thoughts on the discussion of art style versus graphics in the comment section, and I'll see you all in the next one.
I'm definitely very interested to see what his next one's going to be about. He probably will even touch on Unreal Engine as well, and like what you guys were saying here. It doesn't take too much. Yeah, I think teams were smaller then, just more handcrafted and soul put into it. Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere where they were talking about obviously they have a deadline and stuff. They have to prioritize which ones they really want to focus heavily on. So I think, thank goodness this guy didn't talk about Starfield. I would be interested to see what his take is on Starfield, because for sure he's gonna say some negative things about the actual NPCs or the actual characters in the game. And what is the story? Story's not bad though. It is quite fun, but what is the story really? Nowadays it's cookie cutter. Explain. I was watching a video about, this is interesting actually, the guy talked about Final Fantasy. I can't remember which one. It was the worst one apparently, so whichever one that one is. And they said that they had to compromise. So they said that they wanted it to be graphically really pretty. There was like a vase. They had an example, and they said like this vase, it would take the player, the computer, whatever, a long time to render it, and because of that they had to compromise, and so they could only allow like a max of 20 people in one server, and because of that a lot of people were complaining, and then they scratched those things and they listened to what the consumer wanted or the gamers wanted. I think that's a good example. That was very interesting to me, this video. I hope you guys liked it. It really does talk about the differences between graphics and art style, and I think that's something that I've never really thought about, because I'm really new to streaming anyways. Like I'm a year and a half in now. I guess I learn something every day. Yeah, everything we do now, there's more and more things to learn. But yeah, anyways, folks, I hope you guys like that. I'd love to know your thoughts on this video. What do you guys think? Did you realize that too? Or am I the only one that's been so naive living under a rock this whole time? Yeah, let me know. Let me know your thoughts on that one. In my opinion, Starfield's visuals, tech-wise, and performance effort does not justify its heavy system requirements. It comes across as incredibly inefficient and optimized. I think for me, it's a great game. There's so much content in that game. Like I can see myself spending many hours in this game because there's a lot of exploration. It makes it very worthwhile. But the NPCs, nah. The characters that you see when you land on these different planets, nah. We went to planet Earth yesterday, by the way. Did I tell you that? And there wasn't a lot of things to scan. There wasn't a lot of things to really do. I was a bit disappointed. That video was composed by someone who is not in the game industry. I think his points did come across pretty well because I am new to gaming, right? Let's just say. I mean, I used to game back in the day, but then I stopped because I had to work and it consumed my life. So I had no downtime. No downtime. And when I did have downtime, I'd either be doing chores, housework, or I would then, if I had time after that, I would then finally watch something on Netflix. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, out of the games that I have played, my knowledge on graphics have definitely changed because of this guy. I think he's opened my eyes in terms of some stuff. There is definitely a difference, and once you point that out, you can't unsee it. I've been harping on, for example, about Zelda. I was saying, because Zelda's like my brother's favorite game. It's his favorite game, all right? And he's played Elden Ring as well, by the way. And he said it was really fun. It was a really pretty place, really pretty game. I agree. I think it is quite pretty, so I don't know what he meant by that. This guy did touch on Elden Ring, and he said that the graphics weren't so good. He didn't say that he said that. He said someone else said that. I wonder why. I wish he explained that bit. But other than that, I used to remember the graphics in Zelda, and so I feel like playing the latest Zelda, what really has changed? And it makes sense. They decided to keep it, well, they upgraded some bits, right? But they decided to keep the art style the same. Pretty games will sell you on the initial shiny, but have staying power, and maybe that's all they care about. The ADHD cell. That's true too. Like, you can get into a game because it looks, you've watched the trailer and you're like, this is gonna be amazing. And then, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours in, you give up because it's just not this. Maybe the story is not grasping you. Maybe the combat's crap. You know, we can think about one good example, Forspoken. I mean, if we talk about Gollum though, Gollum was shit visually. Let's be honest, it was really shit. The story was crap. It wasn't fun. Everything about it, the world was meh. That was just doomed. It did not tick any boxes. I don't know what they were thinking. But Starfield's not bad. Honestly speaking, it's not bad. I like Starfield. Gollum Game of the Year. What is the worst game you've purchased that you've regretted and it's too far to ask for a refund? I think that saying the video was a little merit because the creator is not a video gaming insider, dismisses the important consideration for the video gaming industry, the player. As an opinion video, the fact that he is a player rather than an insider makes his point of view perhaps the most relevant, even if the rest of us disagree with his view. Did you disagree with his view? I agreed, hey. I mean, I think he's right. Like, graphics don't actually, I mean, it's definitely a plus. For me, it's a major plus. Like, most of the games that I really enjoy are graphically, visually pleasing, right? But at the same time, I don't like cartoony games. I don't really play anime type games. I think the bright colors hurt my eyes, like I said earlier on. So, I mean, I can say I do agree with what he's saying, how it doesn't necessarily matter because Valheim was such a good game. I can only bring up examples of games that I've played, and that's why I only bring up a small group of games that I've played. And by the way, if you do want to check out the games that I have played, I might quickly throw that in there. You can go and check that out. He's sleeping, don't worry.